Hey kids, good morning. I am here today to talk about other YouTubers and writers that you should be following and checking out. You actually caught me, I'm reading John Adams's newsletter. His new newsletter, I didn't know what had happened to this guy during COVID. He suddenly stopped newslettering, but I used to follow him on Twitter. I'm not sure how his last name is pronounced. It's either Adamus or Adamus or Adamus. Maybe the A is silent. I don't know. But regardless, this guy writes beautifully. And even if you don't follow his advice, his writing is just beautiful. So you should definitely check him out. Another good writer you should check out, of course, is Jenna Moreci. If nothing else, for her energy. I haven't actually read her stuff, but her advice is good. And her book about writing the damn book, I can't recommend enough. Haven't read it, but I have a feeling I know what it says. I know for me, my biggest challenge is just writing the book. Mainly because I don't have a full understanding of what should be happening in this story. And I think a lot of that is fear. There's a lot of fear, in being a writer, a lot of fear you have to overcome. The biggest bit of fear is the fear of doing it wrong, of just being wrong, just writing something bad. And I'm here to tell you that you have my permission, my official permission, to go forth and write something terrible. Seriously. Because if you aren't willing to write something terrible, you'll never be able to write anything good. And that's just the truth. Most of writing is rewriting anyway. Even the stuff you think is beautiful writing that you've done, you're going to end up rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. That's just how it works. It doesn't mean you wrote something bad. It just means you had an idea to make it better. Anyway, let's look a little bit at John's newsletter for today. John helps you write better. The Writer's Secret Weapon is what it's called. Secret Weapon, Volume 1, World Rules and Inventor, 36 Chambers, Why Magical School Stories Still Sell, Wrestling Basics, March 9th, John Adams. I'm going to go ahead and like this post because he's amazing. And I know it's going to be good. I'm not going to subscribe for the paid subscription because I don't have that kind of money. Let's see here. Writing advice. When you're building a world, that world needs rules. Well, of course. Yeah. He's got some good stuff here about world building, history. He always likes to pull in something out of history that illustrates the point he's trying to make, which is, and it's wonderful. It's always interesting, very interesting. Interesting. This one's about the guy who invented the bicycle, so that's cool. And then music, publishing news. And he talks about magical school stories that still sell well. It is kind of funny. A lot of people are writing books about going to a magical school. There's even a show on Netflix, School of Good and Evil. It's like, what is this? How blander can you get? At least in terms of the title. I haven't watched the show. It might be a good show. I have no idea. I will say I enjoyed, oh gosh, what was that movie called? It was definitely based on a YA book of some form, but it was the family that had good witches and bad witches, and the girl was turning 16 and she had to decide if she was going to be a good witch or a bad witch. And it's corny as hell, but I loved it. It was great. I thought it was great. Emmy Rossum's in it. She does a wonderful job. She's a bad guy. What's her name? I'm just going to call her Beatrice because she was Beatrice in that Much Ado About Nothing movie. But you know who I'm talking. Emma Thompson. Thank you. Emma Thompson is in it, as well as Gustav Waltz. What's his name? Is that his name, Gustav Waltz? No. What's his name? The guy who played Hans Landa. Christoph Waltz. That's right, Christoph Waltz. Yeah, Christoph Waltz. That's the guy. He has that face. He's pretty cool. You may hear my roommates moving around in the background. Don't worry about it. They're cool people. So anyway, what else can we do today? Well, maybe we'll do a little writing. So I'm stuck in this scene, mainly because I don't have a purpose for this scene. I think that's my problem. It's the beginning. And beginnings are always hard to write. I'll write that. Beginnings are always difficult. Let's start in the middle. And I'll just start with him joining the guard. Callan luck was just about to change for the worse. But just when the horse began to bring its hooves down into paste, the guardsman pulled up on the reins, sparing him. There we go. How about this? How about this stuff happens after that stuff? Cut. Paste. And then I can rewrite that part. Perfect. I'd rather rewrite than write anyway. Because rewriting is easy, kind of. It's easy and it's not. It's easy in a different way. In other words, you don't have a blank page you're staring at that's all intimidating you, but you do have to make it good, and you have to polish and sand stuff down and all that stuff, which I almost prefer doing that because it's more the tweaking versus coming about whole cloth. When it's whole cloth, it's like, I don't know. I don't know what happens. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I can just go, but that hasn't been happening lately. Don't know why. Oh, I did finish that story we were talking about last week with the gentleman who had graduated from high school and went to college and kind of flopped out. Didn't know what he was doing with his life. I finished that edit. I sent it to my editing group, and you should see the comments I got back. There were a lot. It is not done. Nowhere near. They picked that thing apart, man. And I'm glad you gotta have a group or at least one or two other guys who can pick apart your story and show you where the problems are. Now, if you go through and try to fix every single problem the way everybody asked you to do it, eventually your story becomes a Frankenstein of multitude of voices. You don't want that. But you do want to take that advice and try and work that into the story with your voice, if that makes sense. Otherwise, it just becomes a hodgepodge of voices. I used to make the mistake of getting just frozen, trying to apply everyone's advice. And it's impossible, because some people will have you erase whole sentences that other people wanted you to edit, so you can't do everything that people tell you to do. You've got to find that balance in your writing. Okay, anyway, where was I? Whoa there, he called. As Callan rolled to the side and kipped up. Hey, watch it. He exclaimed. Blood pumping, not registering quite that who he was addressing. A captain of the Iron Guard. So now we've got conflict. All right, that's the thing. A lot of times with chapters, when you don't know what's happening, you don't know what should go next. You're basically getting bored with the writing is what's happening. That's what was happening to me. I was getting bored with this chapter, had no idea where it was going because it wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't moving. The train had stopped. You don't want to stop the train until the end of the story. And even then, you slow it down, and just as it stops is when you close the book. That's your ending. You don't keep the story parked on the platform watching everyone else leave. You know what I mean? Sleeping on the bench. You don't do that. Your reader will lose their mind. They'll get bored. They'll fall asleep. They'll throw the book across the room. They won't want to finish. Especially, you don't want to do that in the middle of your story or at the beginning of your story. It's the worst place to do that. You want action right away. Now, does action have to be a guy almost getting trampled by a horse? No. Does it have to be a dude coming in a room with a gun? Absolutely not. Does it have to be a sex scene? No. Does it have to be violent? No. It can be a slow scene. Action can be slow. Action does not mean fast. Action only means movement. And that movement can be a stillness that's so tense that it builds suspense. For example, a guy dangling in a prison cell by his arms, just chained up. How did I get here? It creates a question, right? That's the point of a beginning. A beginning has to have some kind of question of how did we get here? Where is this? Not where is this going? Because that's a frustration question. That's a point of pain. You don't want that. What you do want is, who is this guy? What's going on? I'm intrigued. You want to be intrigued. You don't want it to be what's going on as in, what is going on here? This is dumb. You don't want that. Because that's like, I don't care about these people. The worst thing that can happen to your story is no one cares. People think the worst thing that can happen is people hate your story. No. People will read a story. They will buy a book to hate on it. That's fine. Go ahead and buy my book to hate on it. I give you permission. I will take your money still. What I don't want is someone to say this book is just dumb and I'm not going to read it. Because I don't care. I don't care about any of this. That's not good. If people don't care about your story, it's a bad thing. Anyway, what were we talking about before? Was other authors, booktubers, writers you should be following. Alex Harrow, another great writer. She has a Substack. I would definitely check her out. I'll put a link to all these people in the doodly-doo down there so you guys can check that out. Check them out, rather. Excuse me. Jenna Moreci doesn't have a Substack, I don't think, but she does have a YouTube and an Instagram. Brianna Morgan's another great writer. She has an Instagram and a BookTube, but she doesn't use BookTube as much. I would check her out on Instagram. She's much more active there. Other great, I'm not on Instagram. I used to be, but not anymore, just because I barely use it. It's just another thing to update. I like YouTube better. I feel like there's more people here and there's less negativity because you can avoid it easier. You just don't read the comments and you're fine. Whereas, Instagram, the comments are half the fun. But then people start fights and it gets ridiculous. So anyway, Ebony Elizabeth Thomas, another great writer. She talks about the dark fantastic. Great stuff. She's on Twitter. She's very active there. And you should check her out. Who else? I should write these names down. I don't remember. I'll just say 5, right? Who have we said so far? Alex Harrow, Brianna Morgan, John Adamus, Jenna Moreci, Ebony Elizabeth Thomas. That's 5. You have your homework. Now, what are we going to write? Okay. But the guardsman just smiled. You have pretty good reflexes, he said. And I saw how you wallet a way back. Don't worry, that was a decoy. That's dumb. I'm not going to do that. But anyway, I'm gonna create some dialogue, have some stuff happen so he gets into the Iron Guard. That's what needs to happen next. The character needs to get to the Iron Guard, because that's when the story picks up. Is when he's in court, starting to make enemies, and then he gets sent on his journey, and then he does the journey, and then he comes back. All of that has to happen in the book. And that's my outline. I did an outline for this book, but I didn't do a chapter by chapter outline. I have done that before. I do recommend it, but I just haven't done it for this one. And maybe I will. Because I have a 1-paragraph summary of the book. And then I have book 1, a 1-page summary, but I don't have it going chapter by chapter. Each sentence here is pretty much a chapter, though, so I may just do that. 2 sentences, that should be 2 chapters. So maybe this is chapter 2, chapter 1, and this is chapter 2. There we go. I'm further along than I thought. I've got chapter 1 and chapter 2 going. I've got 600 words now. Not great. You get to at least 1,000. This book 1 needs to be about 100,000 words. It's hard to get that many. I'm an underwriter, which means that if you give me an assignment that is 5 pages, I'll find a way to do it in 3. If you say you have 2,000 characters, I'll do it in 500. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not. It helps when you're a grant writer because a lot of times they don't give you a lot of space to say what you need to say. And I'm able to shave off the fat to get to write the meat and potatoes of what you're trying to say. And that's why my grant applications are wonderful. Problem is, sometimes you need a little fat. Sometimes you need that extra detail to make the story come alive. And otherwise it just reads like a skeleton. And that's the danger of being an underwriter. Being an overwriter, the challenge is, how do I cut all my beautiful prose? I wish I had that problem because I'm good at cutting, right? But overwriters wish they had my problem. They wish they could say it in 1 page and not 20. But anyway, fantasy is overrun with overwriters right now. Actually, that's one reason why I may want to consider self-publishing, because traditional publishing is looking for 1-inch to 2-inch long books to fill up the bookshelf. There's not a lot of space for 200-page books, 300-page books. They're looking for those 400, not even 400, 600, 800, 1,200-page behemoths. 600 pages. That used to be unusual, but now it's almost the standard. Yeah. I'm talking in pages. As far as word count goes, that's more like 150,000, 120,000. I'll give you an example, right? Game of Thrones word count. Let's look that up. Game of Thrones word count. The word count for the novel Game of Thrones, the first book in the Song of Ice and Fire series, is 298,000 words. Clash of Kings, 326,000. Storm of Swords, 424,000. These are older books, right? Let's find something a little bit newer. Let's go for Marissa Meyer. I love her writing. She does Lunar Chronicles. Those books are, I guess, somewhat older now. They came out in the 20-teens. But let's look at their word count, because they even are longer than mine. Oh, wow. Cinder was around only 70,000 words. It felt longer. 87,000 was for the final draft, it looks like. Why am I finding different numbers based on wherever? How about this? Cinder book word count. How long was Cinder? 70,000, about 70,000. That's YA though. That's the thing. YA fantasy can be around 85,000, 90,000 words. Yeah. But adult fantasy needs to be longer. Now, when I was growing up, there was no such thing as adult fantasy. It was just fantasy sci-fi. That's it. That was the whole genre. And all your horror, all your fantasy, all your sci-fi, steampunk was almost a thing. Alternative history was just Harry Turtledove, pretty much. And that was it. That was your genre. So there was no question about, are you writing for kids or adults? It was just, oh, you're writing fantasy. Okay, well, here's your fantasy agents that you would apply to. Now you have to think about, am I writing for adults or kids? Well, not kids, but, young adults. Well, the question is, what does that mean? And we can talk about that later. We're about 21 minutes in, almost 20 and a half minutes. I don't want to go too much longer, maybe 3 or 4 more minutes. Let's see if we can get a shape to this chapter. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take my own advice. I'm going to give myself permission to write something big. What needs to happen in this chapter? What needs to happen is Callan join the Iron Guard. I'm going to put this in italics so I know to change it later. And makes some friends and enemies. Lots of people don't initially like him. He doesn't look fey. Maybe he does. I don't know. I haven't decided that. The problem is, do I want pale skin to be a part of fairy blood, or do I want to just edge away from that? Because that was initially where I was going to go with it. Was that if you have paler skin, you have more likely to have fairy ancestry. Because in the lore, right, elves are called elves. It comes from the Latin word alb, which means white. In the lore, the fairy folk, the fair folk, the fae, were always very pale skinned. That's how they're described. Okay? In the lore. Okay, but it's the year 2023. I had to look it up. It's the year 2023. Why not just have some tan elves, some brown elves, some black elves? I mean, especially because when you go to other cultures and look at African lore or look at South American lore or Asian lore, their versions of elves and pixies and fairies and whatnot aren't always white-skinned. Now, South American, yes, they had the legends of the pale god who went over the sea, and that's why they thought a lot of the conquistadors were, oh, there are gods returned. That's true. But Africans had dark-skinned supernatural beings. So there's really no excuse. If your excuse is, oh, it wouldn't be historically accurate to have a black knight or a black elf or a black dwarf or whatever. Actually, black dwarves are lore accurate. The Duergar, the dark dwarves, dark elves, they had darker skin in Norse myth. I believe they did. Whether it was from their forges or what have you, they had darker skin. So having black dwarves and white elves, that works from a lore perspective if you're going to be 100% to the lore. Do you have to be 100% to the lore? Absolutely not. Is Heimdall black in original Norse myths? I honestly don't remember. I believe he's described as being very fair featured. I don't know that always meant pale, though. You know what I mean? Fair could have meant just fine or beautiful. All right? Just like black didn't always mean having dark features. It just meant you might have dark hair, dark eyes, like the Black Irish. The Black Irish were not dark-skinned. They had dark hair and dark eyes. That's why they're called Black Irish. But, so it just depends how you want to read it. And then, of course, the argument is these are supernatural beings that don't exist. They could be any color you want them to be. Your elves can be yellow. Your elves can be green. Your elves can be red, blue, white, black, brown. Doesn't really matter. Want to have all brown people? You could if you wanted to. I didn't want to get into all this, but I think it's important to address because it's not so much you don't want to be called racist as you don't want to be racist, really. You want to fight against that because you have to. It's people are being judged on the color of their skin every day. And we should fight against that, don't you think? It just exists. It's just a thing that happens that's unfair and There's no reason to perpetuate that in our writing. Anyway, what does that have to do with anything? Well, if Callan looks fey, meaning has paler skin, then people would be more likely to believe that he might have that ancestry. Okay? I could just give him a pointy ears though. So, but then that's the other thing of like, what's the difference between a fae and a human? If it's just a human with pointy ears that lives a long time, it's not a good, whatever. Shannara Chronicles had brown elves. The TV show did. And it worked fine. So I may just have brown elves. And y'all can just deal with that. Anyway, so yeah, check out John Adamus, Alex Harrow, Brianna Morgan, Jenna Moresi, and Ebony Elizabeth Thomas. And I will catch you guys next time.